going.
A couple of moments, Lord Mayor, and we will be streaming. It's just loading now to YouTube.
Thank you. I see the Deputy Lord Mayor has joined us.
We're live, Lord Mayor.
Okay. So members, I declare the meeting of the Adelaide Parklands Authority for the Thursday, the 18th of June open, and advise that this special telecommunications meeting of the board will be recorded and streamed live to the City of Adelaide website. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken of this meeting. This means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed, or published publicly by the Council, including transfer outside of Australia. Acknowledgement of Country. The Adelaide Parklands Authority acknowledges that we're meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pays respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and acknowledge that they're of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. We also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations who may be with us today. Members, item 2 on the agenda are apologies. I have no apologies for today. Noting that I'm still hoping that Stephen Forbes will be able to join us shortly. Report for the consideration of the board. There is one report with a recommendation for the board, and that is item 8.1, which is the Brown Hill and Keswick Creeks Stormwater Management Project in the South Parklands, and that's on page 3. I'd like to invite Clinton Devenish, the Director of Place, to provide a brief introduction. Also, we have the Management and Project Design team with us, and I believe they're going to share a PowerPoint with us for the presentation. So, Clinton, I'll just hand over to you. Sorry, I'll just go to Ben. Ben, was there anything that you needed to?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a quick one. I'm not sure if this is the right point of the process, but regarding conflict of interest.
Yes.
I just wanted to, I guess, flag that a possible perceived conflict of interest, that I'm employed by the City of Unley, and they are a financial contributor to the Brown Hill and Keswick Creek Management Board, but I don't perceive it to be more than a perceived, and intend to participate in the debate today.
Thank you very much, Ben. Clinton, if I could hand over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, members. Look, I will leave the majority of what needs to be said tonight to Peter from the Brown Hill Keswick Creek team as the project director, and Angelo Lanzilli as the project manager, together with the designers Olivia and Robin. I just wanted to add that the Brown Hill Keswick Creek system itself is the subject of approximately 15 years of work done behind the scenes to actually form together what we now call the Brown Hill Keswick Creek regional subsidiary. The regional subsidiary was formed after 15 years of design and effort into the stormwater management plan for Brown Hill and Keswick Creeks. That stormwater management plan has been endorsed by the Stormwater Management Authority, and the formation of the regional subsidiary has been brought together to actually deliver the entire network of Brown Hill Keswick Creeks, right from the hills through to the sea. The City of Adelaide is fortunate enough to be one of the first projects undertaken along the whole alignment of the creek in the South Parklands. It's a critical piece of work that enables a large detention and wetland space to be formed, and it certainly is a critical part of the infrastructure and the system itself. And as I said, we're fortunate enough to be one of the first cabs off the rank for what will be a project delivered and funded by the 5 constituent councils over the next 20 years. So that's just a bit of the background. Really appreciated the ability to attend the site today and hear from the designers about some of the specifics. And they're here tonight to provide you with some more context and some more information about the project. So I'll hand over to them now.
Thank you. Members, we're going to keep the considerations informal so that we'll have a presentation and then we'll take any questions or comments from you before we go into the recommendations. So I'll hand over to the project team.
If we could share a screen, Lord Mayor.
You can give it your best shot.
Give it a crack. We should be with you.
Excellent. Thank you. We can see you.
Good. Thanks very much, first of all, for everyone's time on site this afternoon, and thanks, Clinton, for that introduction. Just continuing on from what Clinton was saying, I thought I might start by providing a little bit of background to the project and how we've actually got to the stage we're at the moment. The current situation is that we have over 2,000 properties impacted by flooding within the catchment council areas. Brownhill, Keswick, Glen Osmond and Parklands creeks have a combined catchment which is mainly contained within the local government areas of Adelaide, Burnside, Mitcham, Unley and West Torrens. And those 5 councils together have collaborated over a number of years, as Clinton mentioned, to create a stormwater management plan, which will essentially safeguard properties within the catchment from the flood impacts that currently occur. The community impact is estimated to be in excess of $250 million. So it is a significant impact on the community. The collaboration between the councils has led to the development of a stormwater management plan, which, as Clinton mentioned, was endorsed by the state government. And the Brownhill and Keswick Creek Stormwater Board was established in 2018, essentially to implement the stormwater management plan and deliver the infrastructure projects required under that plan. This slide provides a bit of an overview beyond just the City of Adelaide, but across the whole of the stormwater management plan delivery area. And you can obviously see the South Parklands detention basins and wetland up in the top right-hand corner, along with several other infrastructure projects and pieces of work that we're looking to deliver over the coming years. Some of the works have already been delivered and we have some under construction at the moment. And obviously the South Parklands project is a key component of the larger delivery plan. So in terms of implementation of the stormwater management plan, flood mitigation is the key objective, but it's not the only objective. There are important environmental and community benefits that have also been identified within the stormwater management plan. Things like improved quality of stormwater discharged into marine waters, reuse of stormwater for greening of urban open space areas, creek rehabilitation, protection of biodiversity, and significant opportunities for improved recreational amenity in open space areas throughout the creek network. If we move on to specifically looking at the South Parklands project, the project has 3 key components. The enlargement of a basin on the Glenside development site. That component of the work is being delivered by the Glenside developer. So that sits a little separately to what the Brownhill Keswick Creek Stormwater project is now delivering. The second and third components are what we've looked at today, being the wetland in Victoria Park and the Park 20 creek works. So the 3 components should really be considered as a larger piece of work, which together reduce the flow of stormwater in Parklands Creek to a level that can be accommodated both within the Parklands and in the downstream areas. Just in terms of the design development, as Clinton mentioned, this project has been many years in the making, both in terms of the Brownhill-Keswick Creek Stormwater Project as a whole, but also specifically with regard to the South Parklands component of the work. A 2006 master plan initially proposed 6 temporary storage basins in the South Parklands, and over time that has evolved into the plans that we're now looking at in Park 16 and Park 20. I might just hand over to Robin now, who's going to go into a bit more detail about the wetland design, first of all, including some of the features of the design and obviously the tree impacts. So we'll hand over to Robin.
Thanks, Peter. So we'll start the story of the wetlands in Victoria Park. Back in with the 2014 concept, this was the concept. Hopefully people can see the mouse. And the wetland wove its way all the way around to the northeast, around the butterflies, and then down to the bottom into the west here, notably taking out these gum trees. And then in big storm events, the whole area would flood much in the same way as we're proposing now. So that was basically our starting point a couple of years ago. And what we've done is to try and consider the site constraints and to see how much trees we wouldn't need to remove. Also, one of the major considerations is reducing the net export of earth from the site. There's considerable volume that needs to be excavated, and reducing the amount of off-site disposal is pretty important. So this plan just gives you a quick idea from above of some of the constraints: the butterfly conservation area, the native grass area, the historic plantings along the southern bank of Parklands Creek to the bottom that we walked along this trail. We have Beaumont Road and the new bridge, the crossing. Some beautiful trees through here. In addition, there's 2 lovely groves of trees, the 2 we walked between. We walked up through here. And then there's playing fields to the north, and another grove of trees out here to the northwest. So I guess in general, it's just worthwhile considering that we're trying to do a lot in this space. We're trying to achieve a number of different objectives, not just flood control, but enhancing the biodiversity of the area, but also giving back a big recreational asset to the users of the park. So what the focus in the last couple of years of the design development has really been around the butterfly area, reducing tree loss, but maintaining the functionality. And the scale of what we're trying to do here is pretty impressive. It's something like 100,000 cubic metres of flood storage, which is pretty significant, and then a 3-hectare wetland, which is not small at all. So we're trying to push it pretty hard, and we believe we've tried as best we can, and hopefully what we can do is explain a little bit of our thinking. So this is the current shape of the wetland, and the way it operates is Parklands Creek will flow into what's called an inlet pond. This is a relatively deep pool of water, 1.5 to 2 metres deep. And the idea is that flows will come into that area, the coarse sediments will settle out into the base of the area, and it also regulates flows into what's called the macrophyte zone of the wetland, the main area of the wetland, which is this area through here. This area regulates the flows so that if a very big flow comes in, flow will bypass over a weir and flow down Parklands Creek, avoiding scaring the vegetation in the wetland. The wetland itself, as I mentioned on site, is predominantly quite shallow, 100 to 300 millimetres deep, and is planted with bands of vegetation that go perpendicular to the main flow path. The idea being that the water coming into the wetland needs to interact with the vegetation and therefore have the treatment system. Interdispersed along the macrophyte area of the wetland will be some deeper pools, and these are for habitat, for refuge for mosquito larvae predators, as well as other aquatic animals. So the wetland itself, flows will move around this area very slowly, taking 2 to 3 days to drain through the wetland. and it'll get to this point, and then there'll be a pipe with a pit, and within the pit is a flow control structure, which just regulates the rate at which flow leaves the wetland. When that gets exceeded, the water levels start to rise in the wetland, and when they rise more than 250 mil, it backflows all the way back to here, and then flows come down the creek and flow down to a culvert which goes through the flood embankment. The flood embankment, you can see with the contours in red here, encapsulates the whole area to maintain a constant level that allows water to build up behind it in the rare, very rare events. This is the 100-year event, which means the water will pond up to 2.5 to 3 metres deep in those areas. And then over a matter of hours, will then drain back down to just the wetland area itself. So that's the main function of the wetland. You can see here, in addition to just the function, there's a heap of landscape features which we've introduced. There's almost 2 kilometres of walking path network, giving people a kind of variety of experience. There's a DDA compliant path which goes all the way around the perimeter of the wetland, offering views from viewing areas, resting areas, and in addition there's a secondary path network where there's a couple of boardwalks. You can move through the grove of trees, and then this would be a series of sort of stepping stones that you can cross, and kids can get involved in getting down there and listening to the frogs and so on. So there's a variety of experiences which we're offering up. In addition to that, there's some viewing areas where you can have amphitheatres, and the vision for that is to things like school groups can go there and get some educational activities about how wetlands work, the importance of aquatic animals and so on. Another component is the running track is actually a little bit longer than what it is at the moment. I understand it has been shortened over the years with modifications around that perimeter, but it's now going to pass along the top of the flood embankment through this area, and it gets a little bit longer, but it will also have great views to the south, looking over the wetland. To the north of that bank is the sporting fields, and the batter here is quite mild, 1 in 6, and it's been designed so that it can form a bit of an amphitheatre to watch the kids play sport on a Saturday morning. So to give you an idea, this is the section looking from the sporting fields across to the car park. Excuse me. And you can see where we have the running track up on top of the bund. We're then going to use a couple of gabion baskets to try and reduce that batter width from the top of the running track down into the wetland. And on the northern side is a much milder batter, which will form that amphitheatre. A couple of artist impressions of how it might look with a teacher teaching about butterflies or frogs or something or other. But there'll be some fantastic vistas around, particularly given the huge stand of existing trees to the south of the wetland system. And so, just by way of an example, this is a project we designed a few years ago in Norwood St. Peter's at Felixstowe Reserve. This was how it looked before the works were done, and this is how it looks today. And it has a lot of similar kind of landscape features of the path network, the boardwalks. You can just see some stepping stones up in this area. You can also get a sense of the variety of vegetation that it brings to the park in terms of the biodiversity and the habitat values. Obviously, as part of the recent work, we tried very hard to minimise any tree loss. So an arborist was brought in to do a tree assessment, and they have a series of retention ratings that they determine based on their scores for the tree structure, the height, its habitat values, linkages to other trees, and amenity values and so on. And that work comes back with 4 categories of either important, high, moderate or low. Clearly the important and the high category are the ones that need the most compelling reasons for removal, and they're the ones we focused the hardest on in terms of trying to retain. So a summary of the trees that we're proposing to remove at Park 16 shows that there's 33 trees. not including the Poplar Grove, and 2 of those are regulated trees. One was in the wetland that we looked at, and one was along the northern bank of the creek. So I'll talk now particularly about the tree in the wetland. We also have a lot of supporting information if members want to discuss any of the other trees, and we can talk about that perhaps during question time. This is a summary just to show the groupings of trees and where the main tree removals are, and the red circles are the two regulated trees that we spoke about on site. So we've got more information on all of these trees that we can take questions at the end of the presentation if need be. But in particular, the tree I'd like to just spend a little bit of time on, now I've forgotten the number of it, I think it's 61, but it's this tree here, which is this guy that we looked at on site. And one of the main constraints we have is for wetland function, we need to maintain a minimum width of wetland, because that, if it gets too narrow, the flow velocities get too high and we scour out the vegetation. So why can't we make this any wider? The problem is when you look at the running track here and the required batter at 1 in 6, we start to impact another grove of trees to the north. So we can't essentially push it any further north. If we came any further south, with the normal 1 in 6 batter, we'd almost run all the way into these trees. So what we've done is use some gabion baskets to create a near vertical edge, which allows us to maintain a minimum width. And therefore, the width here is about 10 or 11 metres. And I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable making it any narrower than that. So that's the constraint we're faced with. On the balance of it, we do get to maintain or keep these other trees, and it creates a kind of lovely vista in the middle of the wetland. And yes, we did think about keeping the tree as a stag, if you like, in the wetland, but there's the construction constraints of trying to create the impervious barrier made of clay across the base, which we did speak about on site. So that was the main reason that one is earmarked for removal. Now, what I'll do now is hand over to Olivia, who will explain the rationale for Park 20, and then we'll come back and summarise.
All right, thank you, Robin. So the works in Park 20 complement the works in Park 16. They work to further reduce the peak flows. We've got almost 50% reduction in peak flows as a result of the Park 16 works in a large flow event. But there are actually significant inflows into Parklands Creek between Park 16 and Park 20, including those 2 channels we saw out on site. So we need further flow reduction in the South Parklands, and that's really the primary objective of the Park 20 works. And by creating a mound to hold back the high flows, we're creating about 50,000 cubic metres of temporary shallow storage. And as discussed, the mound is less than 1 metre high. So a lot of thought has gone into the design of the Park 20 works, and similar to Victoria Park, it stretches well over 10 years on and off. So as I said, the primary objective is to reduce peak flows out of the parklands. But in looking at the design of the works, we've focused on protecting the significant trees along Parklands Creek. There's an area of significant vegetation, which you can see in the background of this photo. Really nice, significant trees that line the creek. It's nominated vegetation conservation area in the land management plan. And so we've really tried to retain that. We've also looked at other trees within the vicinity of the works and done our best to minimise the tree removals. Park 20 also has a lot of existing users. We've got the sporting clubs, we've got tree climb, we've got the park users of the shared park. So as part of the design development, we've had to balance the works with minimising the impacts on these users. And there's also the safety component. So on top of our mound, we will be having a shared use path, and there are certain requirements around the design of the mound in terms of the width of the mound, the maximum batter slopes, proximity of hazards such as trees and fences, to make sure that that path is safe for the users. So if we just look at the site constraints, as I said, it's a heavily utilised area and there are lots of constraints. So the blue lines are representative of the 3 flow paths. We've got the straight lines are the drainage channels which drain flows from the CBD, and then the one on the right, this one is representative of the Parklands Creek alignment. We've also got those black lines are indicative of the existing shared use path network. We've got the significant trees and biodiversity revegetation site. That green area is the revegetation site. The significant trees extend further upstream along Parklands Creek. We've got a number of sports facilities. We've got the BMX track, the sports fields to the north, and we've also got the hockey and tennis courts in the southwest corner. There's also a number of structures associated with tree climb, which are in close proximity to the proposed works. So the features of the design, as discussed on site, we've got a low level mound, less than 1 metre, and to be effective at retaining those flows, the mound needs to be continuous, and it extends from just east of the tree climb facility, generally follows the alignment of an existing shared use path, threads between the ovals and the tennis courts, and then it heads in a northerly direction. And just note the shape of the mound, particularly it's most evident in the western section, where instead of a straight line, the mound has been designed to avoid tree impacts. So we've got the arborist assessment, which we'll talk about shortly. And we've been out on site and tried to work out the path of least resistance, shall we say, in terms of tree impacts. And that explains the shape of the mound. And you can see, for example, this section here, the mound deviates quite significantly because there's a large eucalyptus tree in here that we are trying to protect. Another focus of the design is, so there's the mound. Another focus of the design is realigning Parklands Creek. So Parklands Creek currently weaves its way through these significant trees. The creek in this section is heavily degraded, very eroded, steep banks, significant trees right on the edge of the banks. If we were to do any works in this area, it would result in significant tree impacts. So what we're proposing is to realign Parklands Creek by diverting flows at this point, and then we will backfill this section of the creek, and we will backfill it with a porous media and incorporate a low flow pipe, and that's to provide flows to those trees. So those works are protecting the health of the existing trees along Parklands Creek. So then we have the convergence of the 3 channels. So as I said, the primary flood objective of these works is to throttle the peak flows. So we've got flows in Parklands Creek, we've got contributions from the CBD via these 2 channels. There is a culvert here under the shared use path that will act to throttle the flows, and then they'll be discharged towards the existing flow path via a new section of open channel. And as I mentioned, we're stabilising the existing creek line. There's the convergence, new channel. So as mentioned previously and as discussed on site, there has been a significant effort involved in trying to design the works to minimise the tree impacts whilst retaining that flood mitigation benefit. So we've spoken about realigning Parklands Creek. We've spoken about the mound alignment and weaving it through trees and other site constraints. Also note the use of retaining walls. So in areas where we're very close to a site constraint, such as significant trees here, we're proposing to use retaining walls, and this allows us to reduce the footprint of the path and thereby minimise tree impacts. We've also used culverts in a number of sections, and just to demonstrate the benefit of using culverts. So if we have a look at the proposed diversion from Parklands Creek, you can see, and this I acknowledge is a very engineering drawing, but it highlights the proximity of the trees to the works, and those green circles are the tree protection zone. So they're the areas where we really want to restrict works within. If we were to do an open channel to connect the creek, that red area would be approximately the footprint, and you can see it's impacting on those trees. However, by using a culvert, that becomes the footprint of the works and we can avoid tree impacts. So we've used that strategy at a number of locations. South of the new mound here, we spoke about on site some large significant eucalypt trees. We'll use a culvert till we get past the tree protection zone of those trees. So tree impacts, this is a summary of the locations of where the tree impacts are. As Robin mentioned, we do have additional supporting information that we can draw on and present should there be interest during question time. And I'm about to show you a table which summarises the tree impacts. But you can see, for example, the Western Mound where we've got 18 trees impacted. All of those have been assessed by the arborist and are low or moderate retention status. So we've avoided all the high and important retention status. Likewise with Currajong Avenue and also the Sports Club, we're proposing to remove 5 trees. 4 of them have a remaining life expectancy of less than 10 years. So here is the summary of the trees that are proposed for removal. You will note that when we presented the design 2 weeks ago, we were proposing to remove 2 trees which were designated significant. One of those was incorrectly designated as significant and it is actually unregulated. The second one is tree 96 and we've gone back and re-looked at the design, and by using a retaining wall and pushing the pathway further north, we think we can retain that tree, and that's what we're now proposing to do. So you can see that there are 60 trees, but it are 2 regulated trees, and the remainder of the trees are unregulated and a number are low or moderate retention rating. So I just wanted to focus on the eastern section of the channel. So this is where we've got tree 96 and we've got a lot of constraints in this area. So what we're proposing to do is to, where we previously had a batter, just on the mouse, we're going to extend the retaining wall, and this was in the plan that Peter provided you on site. So we will have a retaining wall through here. This will allow us to say tree 96 and we'll push the pathway and mound further north. Currently, the design is showing 95 being impacted. As you can see from this plan, it is directly, it's in the middle of the path. And we can't go further south because of 96 and other significant trees. It may be possible, depending on the requirements around tree climb, to look at pushing the mound further north. It's also noting that during construction, we will be making putting in place efforts to maintain trees, and tree 102, for example, may be able to be retained during construction, depending on what they find in terms of the root structure. And just, we saw tree 96 out on site. It's a large tree, it's a beautiful tree, and we will be proposing to retain it. I will now hand back to Robin, who will talk about the proposed plantings and benefits of the works.
Sure, thank you. So I guess it's worthwhile mentioning as well that part of these works, there'll be over 100,000 new plants in the parklands, and a vast diversity of plant species, much more diverse than what's there currently. There's something like 18 different zones within the wetlands, and each zone will have 4 or 5 different species types. Then we have zones along the creeks, both Parklands Creek in Park 16, but also the new realigned Parklands Creek in Park 20. And that riparian area will be planted out in a similar planting palette to the recent works along Parklands Creek, downstream of Park 16. So that also includes some trees, some melaleucas and casuarinas and so on, but the majority is grasses and sedges, and it's about stabilising the banks. There's also a number of terrestrial areas throughout the parks, and they have a mix of grasses and sedges, some ornamental ground covers, and then also some trees as well. So just to summarise, and we should say thank you for the opportunity to present. We feel with the many new members on the committee, last time we presented, we hadn't set the context of the overall project, and hopefully today we've done a better showing of that. I mean, we believe that the two parkland projects working together, or in fact the three, including Glenside, really do offer some very big regional flood protection benefits. And the two very parkland projects do marry together very well. There's also a lot of other benefits that we think bring, what will be seen as a fantastic asset to the good people of Adelaide as they use the parklands. We've also commenced discussions with Ghana groups about implementing another layer of story of country, using the wetland and the various things to help tell that story. And I think for the recreation benefits in that area will really be enhanced using by the vast majority of the existing trees, and the scale of the space is really quite impressive. So with that, that concludes our presentation. But we invite sort of comments and questions. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that presentation, and thank you for the site visit today. Now, we do have version 2 of the recommendation ready to go, but we'll just wait if there's any questions or comments from the presentation. Can I just remind all board members, if we can't see you, you're deemed to have left the meeting. So just letting you know, I have a raised hand from Alison. So I'll go to Alison and then to Craig. Alison.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions, and I didn't think about this while we were on site, but the wetlands, the inlet sediment catchment basin, are there trash racks on the entry to that? Will there be some control over? I know that there's always issues with debris coming into wetlands, and that's one of the obvious sources. And I just wondered about that, but also about maintenance in general, especially looking at the number of new plants and trees. Is this something that has been sort of factored into budgets and personnel for the future? So I think part of that the project team might be able to answer, but maybe the rest of it could be something that ACC staff.
I'm happy to jump in and answer that. So in terms of trash racks, there are gross pollutant traps, 3 that are incorporated within the Glenside site. So prior to waters passing into the wetland, as part of the Glenside development, there is some incorporation there. In terms of the ongoing maintenance and operation of the wetland, the Brownhill and Keswick Creek Stormwater Board is a regional subsidiary of 5 constituent councils. Adelaide is obviously one of those councils, but each of the 5 councils contributes to the ongoing maintenance requirements of all of the project works and all of the infrastructure works delivered under the project. And those costs have been factored into the long-term planning of the board.
Thank you for that. That does give me some comfort. I was fairly sure it would have done, but thank you very much for that answer.
Well, thank you for the question, Alison. I've got Craig and then Ben. Craig.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've got about 4 or 5 questions. Is that okay if I go through them one by one?
Yes, we're here to discuss it.
Thank you. So the first couple are actually around the governance of the overall project. Is it the same project team involved in both Park 20 and Park 16? So exactly the same governance, exactly the same sort of oversight, or are they separate project teams or separate sort of groups of people?
Yeah, so it is the same project team across Park 16 and Park 20. Robin's involvement is obviously more heavily focused on the wetland because that's his area of expertise. But Angelo from Procure PM is acting as project manager across both sites, and Tonkin involved in the design of both sites.
Okay. And in terms of timing of the works, is the intention to, at this stage, to carry them out consecutively or concurrently?
Yeah, look, that comes down to funding availability. So at the moment, our priority is to commence works on Park 16. Poplar removal would be the first stage of that project. There are some works that could potentially occur concurrently along Park 20 in conjunction with Park 16, but Park 16 is certainly the priority, and the Stormwater Management Plan is developed with the intention that Park 16 works are delivered first.
Okay, no, thank you for that. In terms of the I suppose in general around replanting, could you please just explain us a bit more about the size of the potential replacement trees, although replacement
I've lost
is a really...
you, Craig. Sorry, Craig, you might have to repeat that because we couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, just wondering about yeah, the size of any replacement trees in terms of, I mean, in general, I'm sure that there's a range, but certainly the loss of mature trees at this stage does not seem to be appropriately compensated by replanting in terms of raw numbers because of the, of course, the huge other benefits that come with mature trees.
Well, if I can address the size of the plantings, the majority of the wetland plants and all of the riparian plants will be tube stock, forestry tubes, but the trees themselves that are proposed for around the paths and the key networks are a combination of 45 litre pots and 25 litre pots. And the reason we're not going any bigger than that is really about tree health, with the trees over the long term performing better the smaller they are that they're put in. So it's a bit of a balance between providing, you know, a level of day one effect, but also thinking about the long-term benefits for the trees, letting them establish. But that's the plans at the moment.
Okay.
So what's the approximate height for that? Because I'm sorry, I can't equate pot size with a height of a tree.
A 45 litre pot would be probably about 1,200, 1,500 high at planting. And then it'll be staked and mulched and so on. And then within, you know, 2 or 3 years, that'll double in size.
Okay. I might, yeah, I'll have a bit of a think about that because in terms of emotions, I'm interested in perhaps looking at amending, but I'll do some thinking before I respond to that. The last question I had was actually around tree 61, and thank you for that explanation today on site and again tonight. Could I just really keen to be sure that there is no potential for retention of that tree because it is an enormous size and a prominent location. So today you were explaining that that by keeping it, even if it died, it would essentially create a hole in the wetland basin, which would mean the water would escape from the wetland zone. Is that a correct summation of what you said today?
Yeah, well that's the risk. I mean, we've looked at historical photos of back as far as 1949, and best we can determine the tree was planted in about probably the 80s or 90s, from what we can see. And so it's highly likely that that tree's been planted in fill because that area was built up with contaminated fill for the racecourse. So that being sort of unconsolidated area, it's likely that that material that's been planted into is quite porous. And so it would certainly need to be reworked in order to become waterproof and hold water in the wetland. So while in natural wetland systems, you do see trees that are in wetlands and they die out and they still provide habitat values, and that's great if you can achieve that. I think in this case, in the Parklands area, we're dealing with a very modified system. and the retention of the tree would just seriously impact on the constructability to provide a wetland that's going to hold water with not undue risk. And the problem with the wetland that leaks, and unfortunately I have been involved with a few, is that finding the leak is an absolute disaster. It's almost impossible. And so one of the most important and critical components of building wetland is getting a very solid and robust impervious liner beneath the topsoil layer. And so that's one of the biggest risks about the wetland and not holding water over time.
Okay. Craig, I might go to Ben and then Stephanie. Ben?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To the design team, and picking up on one of Craig's earlier questions around the numbers of trees coming back to site. So I think the numbers of I think it's about 93 from the tables of trees being removed, and about 80 additional poplars. With the performance of a wetland, with the design of it, are there limitations or offsets necessary to keep trees away, or new tree planting away from those areas? Or is there opportunity to increase the number from 120, which I think is listed in our motion, to I guess compensate for the or overcompensate? The presentation said 160. So I guess regardless of the number, is it possible to plant more trees in proximity to the wetland?
In short answer to your question, yes. You know, there are some concerns about root systems impacting on clay liners and so on, but I have less concerns of that than others. So in some regards, yes, we could plant more trees. On the other side of the coin, it's an open grassland area in that part of the Parklands, and the landscape vision was to maintain that open area with not sparse but infrequent trees across that area. That philosophy could be changed. The wetland wouldn't preclude planting more trees.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Ben.
And
Have
then,
you had any more questions?
Sorry, yeah, I just had one more to the governance or the funding of it. I understand we've talked around the value of the works and certainly the scale of works associated with the wetland, but is the I guess the public elements, the decks, the bridges, those costed in that model as well and committed to their delivery?
Yeah, they are. So the Stormwater project is committed to delivering a usable community space. You know, it's not the intention that we deliver just, you know, the flood mitigation component of the works. The wetland comes with, you know, the boardwalks, the walking paths, you know, all of the complementary elements that are incorporated within that design.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Stephanie. So I'll need you to unmute yourself, Steph. Can you do that?
Yep.
See if I can do it.
Sorry, I've done it.
Oh, you did it. Great.
Yeah, sorry,
Great.
I was back looking at the PowerPoint. Yeah, I just noticed on looking at the two lists of trees that are going that we sort of overlooked the fate of the two sets of poplars, one of which is a Poplar Grove. And I was just wondering what kind of assessment was made about their contribution to both landscapes and how that might be replaced or considered, you know, just generally how is their existing contribution assessed, if at all, and whether they're just going to be, it's going to be a clean slate and revert to wetlands with native plantings.
Yes, and thank you. I did perhaps skip over the poplars prematurely in the presentation. The Poplar Grove obviously is a completely introduced species, and the poplars from an arborist perspective is a weed species we want to get rid of. It's an area, if you look at the historic photos the area is expanding, and they sucker and move quite aggressively and they have moved now in the last 10 years down into the creek and are progressing southwards away. So I guess the project team's view is that the parklands are better off without the grove of poplars, and what will be replaced there will be much more beneficial to the parklands biodiversity. So that's Park 16. There's also poplars in Park 20, and perhaps Olivia can mention some of those.
Yeah, so the Park 20 works are removing some of the poplars from the avenue of poplars. We will be replacing them with native plantings along the new sections of channel where space permits. And the community land management plan for Park 20 actually identifies that poplars can be replaced with native species just because they are more drought tolerant. So that consideration has gone into our design.
Steph, did you have anything more? Because you're on mute again.
Sorry, I just meant to say thank you for that information.
Thanks, Steph. Rob, are you okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to tease out further some of the discussion that we had on site in relation to trees, let me get this right, 19 and 90.
95, probably.
95. What are the potential options in terms of pushing the pathway further north, finding a track through there? I understand that on one hand, the landing zone for tree climb presents a problem, but you know, is that something where there's been discussion to see whether there may be movement on that, and if indeed that section of the pathway were pushed northwards, does that provide the potential to then bring the pathway through in such a way that tree 19 could be retained?
So in response to tree 95, if we were able to impact or to move the tree climb landing structure, it may be possible to push the pathway further north and avoid tree 95. That would need to be a conversation that council has with tree climb. With respect to tree number 19, I've had a look at it further since I got back to the office after our site visit, and we are very constrained in that section, not by tree climb infrastructure, but by the location of other regulated trees as well. So if we tried to pull the path further south to avoid tree 19, we've actually got some regulated trees on the southern side of the path that our current alignment is avoiding. And likewise further north. So because the depth of the channel at that point, so we've got the path and then the channel which is adjacent, the depth of the channel at that point is approximately 2 metres. So if 1 in 3 batters, which is the steepest that we think we can go, we're sort of looking at 13, 14 metre top width of the channel. And then we've got the mound to the south of that. So we've got quite a wide footprint that we need to squeeze through that area. And we do have regulated trees north and south of there as well. So it's likely that any changes we do make to protect 19 may impact other regulated trees either north or south.
Okay, could I perhaps ask Clinton whether there's anything you want to contribute around tree 95 and discussions that we may be able to have with the tree climb?
Yeah, certainly, Lord Mayor, thanks. Look, at this point, we did give clear guidance to the Brownhill Keswick Creek project team to, in whatever way possible, mitigate any need to move the tree structures and infrastructure associated with that operation. Obviously, in this case, there is a conversation that we can have and we will have, subject to tonight's outcome from APLA. But we can meet with the lessee and the operator of tree climb, have that discussion, investigate the potential to move that particular landing zone, notwithstanding Olivia's points about a potential shifting of the mound to the south, which may have an impact on potentially more than one tree sitting almost. I think a couple of those trees were actually used as the anchor point for that landing system. So we just need to be really mindful that shifting the mound south may impact more trees than what we currently have impacted in the proposed design. But yes, we can definitely have that conversation.
So, and can we, so when we get to it, we might try and incorporate that in a way in the recommendations so that it's subject to further discussion with tree climb. Would you be okay so that we just make sure that happens?
We'll be absolutely fine to conduct those conversations and try and find a design that works. Yep.
Now, members, if there's no other comments or questions, we might go to the recommendations so we can have a look. So, Steph, was your hand up or you? No?
Sorry, I was just going to make the comment, and this can be part of the discussion anyway, but that maybe one thing we may avoid if we were to get the permission or to negotiate with the tree climb that we move the whole path north, that we may not have the need for the retention wall. So I just wanted to check whether that is a possibility for, I can't remember its name, the big beautiful tree.
Yeah, no, so we still would need the retaining wall, because if at that location in the vicinity of tree 96, we're close to 1 metre tall. So if we didn't have a retaining wall, it would increase the footprint of the mound by 3 to 5 metres.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have before us your amendment, Craig. To this. Did you have some comments? Because I know there were other things that you wanted to talk about there.
Yes, would you like me to just, I suppose, speak in general first before and then going through the particular sections of what I think could change? So I suppose, thank you. Just to, and would like to start off by recognising the work that has been done clearly over a number of years by the project team to minimise tree impact. However, my feeling is that there is perhaps still some more work that could be done, recognising in particular that a lot of the trees that are going to be impacted are river red gums, and these are slow growing and just incredibly important culturally, heritage wise, environmentally, in terms of a feature of the parklands. And also just recognising that they are under incredible stress through climate change, to the point where we are unlikely to see trees of this size again. They simply will not grow from scratch to replace the ones that we have now. So therefore, every single one is absolutely vital. And so thank you very much to the design team for ensuring the retention of tree 96. That's a wonderful outcome, because it's such a beautiful tree. And also recognising there is that tension with a tree climb infrastructure, and in terms of a relative choice of trees that are many decades old versus infrastructure which could be moved and reconfigured. I'm looking to see if we can reorientate the works to ensure that the trees have a greater priority. So essentially, my thought is that and also I suppose there in terms of the description tonight around the timing of the project, depending on funding and in terms of the works, but there's a potential that Park 20 in the wetland could be kicked off and work done while we, on Park 16, while we work on Park 20.
Park 16.
And get that design right. So my suggestion is that we provide support for the wetland component of it, and then I'm still. I've originally written around the retention of tree 61. I'm really torn about that, recognising the technical and engineering challenge to maintain the integrity of the wetland. So I'm prepared, I suppose, keen to get a sense from my colleagues, but I'm prepared to essentially let that one go if we can ensure we can have a red hot go at better tree protection around the tree climb. So
I think from the explanation, Craig, it seemed quite clear that having that sort of impervious lining is actually critical to the wetland, and in which case that would be very hard for us to support that amendment if we want the wetlands to go ahead.
No, I accept that. So I'm prepared to.
And now, given it's your alternate motion, you do a variation to that?
Yes, I'd be prepared to.
Judy, remove your amendment to point 3.
Yes.
Yep. And I think we've done in point 4, just making sure that we've covered off the intent of the discussion this afternoon would be good too. Judy, thank you. Yep.
And I did this very hastily, so happy to get suggestions for improving the language.
I think with that one, we are asking them to relook, and I think you've captured it quite well in terms of looking at the modification. What I'll do now is what I'll ask you to do is move it. I'll look for a seconder, and then we'll actually have a discussion on the alternate motion before us, if you're happy with that. So, sure. Members, I will look for a seconder. If it could be by electronic hand, because I can't see you all at the moment. So, now, Rob, the thumbs up isn't the, I don't know where that came from. I think that was meant to be seconding the motion, but I don't know where that came from. So we have a mover and a seconder. So Craig, if you'd like to speak to the alternate motion, and then we'll do the normal process.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, just as we've I think we've talked in quite a lot of detail. There's I think there's a fair bit of discomfort about the potential loss of trees around the tree climb precinct, and also some real opportunities if there is some good negotiation with the tree climb operators to I think get a more balanced outcome between the waterworks versus the current mature trees there. We have to recognise, I think, that the team has done a lot of work already, and we look forward to their consideration of other options. I'll probably leave it there because I think I've spoken enough around those points. The one remaining point or concern I've got is around the replanting, and I'm not sure about how to capture that, but picking up on Ben's point around is there capacity, particularly around the wetland area, for an increase in the number of replacement trees. I would sort of welcome that as well. I'm not sure if we can capture that.
Thank you, Craig. I'll go to Rob as the seconder. Rob, would you like to speak? Thank you.
I suppose perhaps just supporting the consideration of redesign to preserve 2 more trees in Park 20. I'd note that it would seem somehow right if tree climb were to help preserve trees in the parklands, given that they make their living from them.
Yes. I don't think you'll have any any objection to that, and we've heard that undertaken from Director Devonish that he will, and there was lots of discussion on site, which I think was really helpful for us to be there and actually have a look at the site. Members, anybody else like to speak to the amendment? If not, I might say a few words. Oh no, Ben's got his hand up. Ben, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And apologies if this, I certainly support the intent of the wording that Craig's put forward. My only caution would be, and this may not be the right vehicle, but being too specific in the motion regarding shifting works northwards, that we don't limit options in the design team's further investigation. So I think certainly further works to preserve 19 and 95 is key. Existing tree climb infrastructure is possible, but there might be some north and some southward works to find a balance, and I just wouldn't want the motion to prohibit or limit that.
Perhaps then if we just take the word northward out, therefore any options are available, would that, I'd have to actually go to the mover to see if that's acceptable.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'm very happy with that change.
Then we're not being directive. Rob, as the seconder, are you happy with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Ben, was there anything else you wanted to add there? No? No, members, look, I actually do want to thank everybody involved and the project management team, Clinton, Shanti, Martin. I think that was really, really worthwhile, the board going out there this afternoon to do the site visit, and also so that we could actually look at each of these, particularly the significant trees and the regulated trees that were being affected. I think that this is a really great outcome for this project. And it's exactly what APLA is here for. So I really do thank you for your passion and time and commitment to this. I think we'll get a really good outcome, and I think it's going to be a significant improvement for that whole wetland area. It looks magnificent. So let's hope we can do our best with those two trees, tree 19 and 95. With that, I'm just checking if I need any other undertaking. I think we've got, Clinton, can I just check, is that giving you enough that you need in terms of further discussions?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I think that is very acceptable to us. Certainly, Ben, at the last minute there, just picking up the northwards point, we did have a couple of texts flying backwards and forwards between the team, just if we could remove that. But of course, we can't enter the debate. So that really gives us enough to work with. I think that's really good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. With that, I'll go back to the mover to sum up. Craig?
I'm happy to leave it there, and I really appreciate everyone's words tonight. I think, yeah, as you said, Lord Mayor, the idea of us being able to go on site, consider deeply what we've been asked to look at, and look at alternatives is precisely our role. So I look forward to a redesign that I suppose captures the spirit of the Parklands in terms of making sure we celebrate these amazing trees, which are so much part of the cultural and environmental heritage that we cherish.
Thank you, members. With that, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Jess? I just need, great, thank you. Those against? That is carried. Also, we did actually incorporate Jess's amendment or recommendation from last time into point 9, which I'm assuming all of you saw. So that's it for tonight. Thank you, members. I think that was a really great outcome, and I look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks. Thank you very much. That's it. Good night. Thank you, project team.
Thank you.
And thank you our team as well.